The poor boy said, "Don't eat that." The billionaire wouldn't have listened if he hadn't seen it himself during an exquisite dinner at an expensive Manhattan café. Something happens that will change the lives of 3 people forever. In an atmosphere of wealth and outward prosperity, treachery lurks, but the truth will find its defender from where no one expected. At Bellaire's café, everything was as impeccable as ever. Crystal glasses glistened on the marble tables, with shadows dancing between them from the warm, diffused light. The waiters glided silently as if moving across a stage. Outside the windows, evening Manhattan bustled, but here inside it penetrated only as a muffled echo of a foreign, less refined life. Bernard Chambers sat at his favorite table by the window. He was 72 and he looked the way people of his circle were supposed to look, in an expensive suit, perfectly ironed, with gold cufflinks and an antique watch on his wrist. He ate slowly with the dignity of someone who no longer has anything to prove to himself or others. Next to him sat Marissa, his wife, 40 years younger, slender, well-groomed, with impeccable makeup and perfect hair. She looked with a slight smile at the soup that the waiter had placed in front of her. Her movements were precise, almost theatrical. Occasionally she glanced at Bernardo, loving, caring, a little pensive. "Have you tried their signature tomato soup today?" she asked, pushing the plate toward him. "No, I'm not hungry," Bernard replied, leaning back in his chair. "But maybe a little later." He went back to reading the notification on his phone. For a few seconds, Marissa just sat looking at him, then quickly and deftly poured the contents of the small capsule into the soup. The movement took less than a second. She took advantage of the moment. When the waiter turned away and Bernard was looking at his phone, she stirred it lightly with a spoon, and not a single muscle on her face twitched. No one noticed. Almost no one. Outside the window, a boy of about 12 stood, pressing his forehead against the glass, trying not to attract attention. His eyes were wide open. He didn't know the name of the dish that was in front of the woman. He didn't know who these people were, but he saw her sprinkle something on it, and it wasn't a spice. The boy's name was Malik. He had been living on the streets of Manhattan for almost a year. He didn't care about politics, fashion, or business. He knew the smell of food when he hadn't eaten in a long time. He knew what dangerous people looked like, and he knew how to read gestures, faces, and eyes. Survival had taught him that. Malik moved away from the window, as if pulled by a force. He stood there, indecisive. What could he do? In this cafe, they wouldn't even let him in the door. He had tried many times to sneak into restaurants for leftover food and warmth. Usually he was kicked out, sometimes beaten. Once the police were called, but at that moment something inside him became louder than fear. He returned to the door, pushed it open, and went inside. The silence was deafening. He knew. He looked out of place. A torn sweatshirt, dirty sneakers, a face that hadn't been washed in a long time. In the cafe, everyone turned around. The waiter instantly moved towards him. "Hey, you can't be here," he began. Malik didn't pay attention. He walked towards Bernard's table. Until he was grabbed by the arm. "Please, sir, don't eat that," he shouted. "Your wife put something in the soup." The world stopped for a second. Malik's voice was sharp, loud, desperate. "What did you say?" Bernard turned around, frowning. Marissa laughed. The laughter was forced, ostentatious. "My God, what nonsense. Who even let this kid in? He's some kind of homeless person. He's probably on drugs. Look at him." "Saw it. She put something in the soup," Malik insisted. She had a small capsule, the waiter still holding. The boy's hand was already calling. The manager. The other customers began to whisper. Several people took out their phones. Someone was filming. Bernard put his phone away and looked closely at Marissa. Feeling his gaze, her expression immediately changed. She didn't look scared, more annoyed. Bernard, this is absurd. The boy obviously wants to get attention or money. Don't you dare listen to him. Bernard looked silently at his soup plate, then back at Marissa, and suddenly said to the waiter, "Please bring a new soup from the same batch and call security, but don't let anyone leave yet." Not him. He nodded at Malik. "Not my wife." Marissa turned pale. Malik stood motionless, but inside he was trembling. He didn't know if he had saved someone or ruined his own life and the lives of others, but he knew that he had done the right thing. A long night lay ahead. When the security guards approached, a heavy silence fell over the room. People at neighboring tables froze, not knowing how to react. Some still thought it was a misunderstanding. Others thought something serious was beginning. The manager of the establishment nervously discussed with the waiter how to proceed. Bernard sat silently. He looked closely at Malik. The boy was breathing heavily, but he was trying to stand up straight. He didn't try to run away. He didn't look away. "What's your name?" Bernard asked calmly. "Malik, sir." "Where do you live?" "Right now? Nowhere. Sometimes in a shelter, sometimes on the street." Marissa sighed with irritation. This is a farce. "Bernard, are you really going to listen to a homeless boy who probably just wants to get on video and become famous or get compensation? It's obvious." Bernard slowly turned to her. "Why are you so certain of his motives?" Marissa tensed. "Because I'm not an idiot. He just accused me of attempted murder. Do you hear what he's saying?" "I hear him, and I hear you trying to distract from the point." He turned to the waiter. "Where is the soup my wife offered me?" "It's still on the table, sir. We haven't cleared it away." "Okay, I want it checked. Call someone. The police, the health department, I don't know who, but I want results. And I want all of this recorded. Until then, no one leaves." Marissa jumped up. "You can't be serious." "I'm very serious." The restaurant staff, stunned by this turn of events, nevertheless complied. Someone had already called the police. Malik was still standing between the security guard and Bernard. For the first time, he felt that an adult had heard him. It was strange and scary. "What exactly did you see, Malik?" Bernard asked, without raising his voice. "I was standing behind the window. I often stand there. Sometimes the waiters take out the leftovers. I saw your wife take something out of her coat. It was a small capsule. She quickly poured it into the soup while you were looking at your phone. Then she stirred it with a spoon. It was quick, but I saw it clearly. I know when someone is doing something they shouldn't. And you decided to barge in and tell me about." "Yes. Why?" Malik paused for a second, then looked straight at Bernard. "Because I don't know who you are, but no one deserves to be poisoned, even if you're rich, even if you're married to a beautiful woman." That moment, one of the guests in the hall clapped, awkwardly, quietly, but sincerely. The others looked at each other. Marissa, feeling control slipping away, sat back down and pursed her lips. "He's lying. Street kids always lie." "Perhaps," said Bernard, "but perhaps he is the only one here who is telling the truth." 15 minutes later, the first police officers arrived. They were followed by employees from the Food Quality Control Department. The soup was carefully sealed and sent for express analysis. Everything that was happening was recorded on the restaurant's cameras and the guests' phones. Marissa tried to keep her composure, but the tension in her face was becoming more and more noticeable. One of the police officers began questioning witnesses while another talked to Bernard. He explained the situation calmly and accurately, asking that the boy be treated fairly. Malik sat aside and was given a glass of water. He didn't know what would happen next. He didn't expect to be heard. But now everything had become real. "We'll check the soup," said one of the police officers. "But if there's nothing there, you understand that it will be considered a false accusation. For the boy, this could lead to problems." Bernard nodded. "If there's nothing there, I'll personally help Malik, but if he's right, you have to take action." An hour later, the preliminary results came in. The soup did indeed contain a substance containing deschine, a drug that in large doses can cause cardiac arrest. Available by prescription only. The pause that followed this information seemed like an eternity. The officer turned to Marissa. "Mrs. Chambers, please stand up. You are under arrest on suspicion of attempted murder. This is a mistake. I don't know how it got there. Someone set me up," she cried, but her voice was shaking. One of the policemen put handcuffs on her. The people in the room were silent. Some people were filming it, others were just staring in amazement. Marissa, still protesting, was led out of the cafe. Bernard remained seated. He didn't eat, didn't speak, just stared at his empty soup plate. In front of him lay an overturned fork with one strange detail left behind. Until tonight he had considered this evening perfect. And in the corner sat a 12-year-old boy who changed his life. After Marissa was taken away, the cafe gradually emptied. The patrons left discussing what had happened in whispers. Some expressed sympathy for Bernard, some expressed bewilderment, and some still doubted that it wasn't some kind of stunt. In this day and age, they said, anything is possible. Maybe it was advertising, maybe it was PR stunt. But no one finished their soup. Bernard remained at his table. He asked the staff not to close the cafe early. Malik sat one table away from him, still a little tense, clutching a glass of water in his hands, as if it could save him from everything that was happening. Bernard finally turned to him. "Thanks for telling me." Malik nodded. It was difficult for him to speak. He didn't know that now they could accuse him of anything, but on the other hand, it could have ended much worse. "Are you often around here?" Bernard asked, looking at the boy intently but without hostility. "Sometimes. Bellure has good leftovers. Some waiters throw food out if it's not too busy in the evening. I don't ask. I just wait outside. I'm not always lucky." "Where do you sleep?" "There's a basement a block away with a boarded-up door. Sometimes I spend the night at the shelter, but it's complicated there. There's fighting and theft. I'm better off alone." Bernard was silent. In his eyes there was not pity, but something else, something like growing interest, mixed with regret. He himself grew up in a poor family, though not on the streets. He knew how difficult it was to get out of the hole if no one gave you a helping hand. "How old are you?" 12. "And you don't have parents?" "My mom died. I don't know my dad. Foster homes are worse than the streets. I tried it." Malik spoke dryly, without much emotion, not because he was indifferent, but because he was used to explaining everything briefly. No one is interested in listening to long stories from people like him. "Why didn't you run away?" Bernard suddenly asked. "You knew you could get into trouble." "Yes, but if I had kept quiet and you had died, it would have been worse." Bernard looked at him for a long time, then looked away and took a platinum business card out of his wallet. "Do you know who I am?" Malik shrugged. "No, my name is Bernard Chambers. I am the founder and owner of the Chambers Development Group, a real estate development company. We build homes, offices, schools, and finance some youth assistance programs. I don't know if you've come across the name before. I don't read that kind of thing. Only newspapers from trash bins. They don't write about businessmen there. Bernard smiled slightly. Fair enough. Would you like me to order you dinner? Malik shrugged slightly as if hesitating, but then nodded. Bernard waved to the waiter who brought the boy a warm sandwich and French fries. Malik ate carefully, not like an animal but like someone who hadn't eaten anything normal in a long time but didn't want to look greedy. He ate with dignity. You have a keen eye, Bernard remarked, watching as the boy carefully wrapped the second half of the sandwich in a napkin to take with him later. I learned on the street you have to look around. He noticed the color of the capsule. It was different from ordinary sugar or salt. Your wife is beautiful but nervous. Her hand trembled. People who do something bad almost always make one extra mistake. Bernard nodded. The boy's words were surprisingly accurate, and perhaps he knew the truth more deeply than it seemed. But did you decide she couldn't be trusted? Malik was silent for a long time. She had the face of someone I used to know. That person once hit me, but he smiled before that too. Bernard looked away. He saw Marissa again, all her smiles, gestures, touches, and realized how much he had ignored. Minor causes for concern, strange phone calls, frequent excuses, irritation over trifles. He didn't want to believe she was capable of such meanness, but the fact was the fact. Are you afraid she'll come back? He asked quietly. Malik shrugged. Maybe, but if she does, I think you'll be ready. Bernard smiled, then stood up. Let's go. I'll take you somewhere, but not to the police. Don't worry. I just want to know where you live. Maybe I can do something. Malik froze. He didn't know if he could trust him, but today he had already taken a risk once and made the right choice. He nodded. Bernard paid the bill. On the way out, he paused for a second, glancing at the empty table. The soup remained untouched. The world he lived in no longer seemed so cozy, but somewhere in its shadow stood a boy who wasn't afraid to tell the truth. And perhaps that meant more than all the luxury and status. The police had already begun to investigate the details. Initial analysis of the soup yielded alarming results, and the case was quickly transferred to the district prosecutor's office. There were many questions and little time. The presence of journalists, video recordings leaked on social media. All of this fueled the situation. The story of a rich man poisoned by his own young wife looked like the plot of a crime thriller, but it was not fiction. Bernard Chambers sat in his office on the 5th floor of the Chambers Development Group headquarters. Chambers Development Group headquarters, looking out the window at springtime New York. Yesterday he almost became a victim. Today he found himself in the spotlight. But that wasn't what worried him. Most of all, he thought about how many times in recent months he had seen warning signs and dismissed them. You should definitely only give official comments with your lawyer present, said his assistant, entering with a tablet in his hands. The press is on edge. Your stocks are holding steady for now, but the pressure will only grow. Bernard nodded. He understood that his name was a brand, reliable, respected, and now that name was in all the headlines, but with a different connotation. Where is the boy now? He asked without taking his eyes off the window. We found him. Temporary accommodation. Private center, not a shelter. It's safe there. The conditions are decent. We've provided security while the investigation is ongoing. Okay, I want to talk to him tonight. Meanwhile, at the police station, Marissa sat in the interrogation room without makeup, wearing a gray sweatshirt. She looked younger and older at the same time. She didn't look scared, more irritated. Her lawyer paced from corner to corner. This is nonsense. It's all absurd, he kept saying. They have no direct evidence except for what the boy allegedly saw. He's homeless, a minor. Besides, they can't prove that you added the substance. Cameras? Marissa asked, staring at a single point. Unfortunately, the camera above your table didn't work. For some reason, there may have been a malfunction that works in our favor. But the soup analysis is a problem. She paused. I just wanted to leave gracefully, she said suddenly. No divorce, no division of property, no court. He would have signed the power of attorney anyway. He's old, a month or two, and no one would have suspected anything. He's not a child but a lawyer. You just confessed. Marissa. She smiled. Really? You said they had no direct evidence. By evening, Bernard arrived at the center where Malik was temporarily staying. It was a small house in the suburbs converted into a charity shelter. It was quiet, clean, and smelled of food and warm wood. The boy sat in the common room, looking at a board game but not playing. You did great yesterday, Bernard said, sitting down next to him. I haven't forgotten my promise. Malik nodded slightly. He still didn't know whether to believe. Do you have a dream? Bernard asked suddenly. Yes, the boy said quietly. Just to sleep at night without thinking about where to hide. Just to have my own toothbrush. And know that there will be food tomorrow. Bernard nodded slowly, with pain inside. You'll have all that if you don't mind. I'd like to become your guardian. Not right away, of course, through the official procedures, but if you don't mind, I'll help you. Get an education, housing, a normal life. Malik was silent, then suddenly asked, Why do you believe me? Bernard looked straight ahead. Because I didn't believe myself, but you did. You did the right thing despite everything. And that means you have something that is difficult to buy. Conscience, courage, and a rare sense of when it is necessary not to remain silent. He stood up. I'll leave you my business card. A social worker will come tomorrow. Everything will be official. But the main thing is you're no longer alone, Malik. Bernard headed for the exit and Malik, for the first time in a long time, smiled genuinely, without fear, without a protective mask. 2 days later, Marissa was formally charged. Her lawyers tried to tone down the charges, but there was already too much attention, evidence, and publicity surrounding the case. Attempted murder by poisoning is a serious offense even for people with good connections. And Bernard, he appeared on the front pages not as a victim but as a man who had survived betrayal and chosen trust. In one interview, he uttered a phrase that spread across all the newspapers. A boy from the street saved me. This speaks not to my vulnerability, but to his strength. And as long as there are children like this in the world, we have a chance. A month passed. Spring finally came into its own. The streets of New York bloomed with pinkish-white trees. Coffee shops put tables out on the sidewalks, and passers-by began to smile more often than hide in their collars. The city, as always, moved on. Even after the most sensational scandals, it knew how to forget, not out of indifference, but out of eternal haste. But something remained. Bernard Chambers' name did not disappear. From the headlines, the story of poisoning, sensationalism, exposés, interrogations, court hearings, all of this still stirred up the news channels and morning shows. But attention to one detail did not subside for a particularly long time. To a boy named Malik, who saved the life of a millionaire. The spacious but cozy living room of the Brooklyn townhouse smelled of cookies and fresh coffee. Malik sat at the dining table, doing his homework. He was wearing a new sweatshirt and clean jeans. On the table lay a tablet with digital textbooks, and next to it was a cup of hot cocoa. "How's your math going?" Bernard asked, entering the room with a warm bun in his hands. "Better than yesterday," Malik grunted. "I understand fractions now. They're almost like sharing on the street, only fairer." Bernard laughed. Over the past month, they had grown closer. Not like father and son, it was too early to say that, but definitely closer than just an adult and a rescued child. Malik no longer flinched at touch or turned at every noise. He got used to the silence, to his own closet, to evening conversations. The guardianship was temporary, but Bernard had already filed the paperwork for permanent custody. None of the authorities objected. Everyone knew how it all began and was happy to see how it was continuing. "You knew I might not believe it, didn't you?" Bernard asked one of those quiet nights when they were watching old movies together. "Yes," Malik replied. "But if you had eaten the soup, there would have been no one left to believe it." Marissa's trial proceeded as expected. The defense attempted to use her unstable psychological and emotional state to their advantage, requesting a medical examination and hinting at pressure and stress. However, the prosecution was well prepared. Evidence, confessions, traces of drugs in her belongings, financial documents showing her secretly transferring money to unknown accounts, all of this painted a fairly simple, albeit bitter picture. Bernard did not attend every hearing. He hired good lawyers and decided not to waste his nerves. He had already experienced betrayal and did not want to repeat it. His attention was focused on Malik. One evening they returned home later than usual after a trip to the Natural History Museum. Malik was holding binoculars for the first time and could not take his eyes off the dinosaur model. "You wanted to be an archaeologist, didn't you?" Bernard reminded him. "You wanted to be an archaeologist, didn't you?" Bernard reminded him, when the boy excitedly explained that dinosaurs were like forgotten clues from the past. "I did, and now maybe I can," Malik added quietly. And there was something new in his voice. Hope. They had dinner on the terrace amid the soft sounds of the street and the smells of fresh pizza which Malik himself had helped to heat up. Bernard looked at him and thought how easily their paths could have never crossed. Everything was decided by 1 second, 1 action, 1. "Don't be silent. Remember, you said you wanted a toothbrush and a place to sleep?" Bernard asked as night fell. Malik nodded. "Now you have more than that. But if you ever want to go back to your old life, I won't stop you. Just know that you always have a home here." Malik didn't answer. He just walked over and hugged him. For real, without fear, without defense. A little more time passed. Malik started attending a private school. Turned out that he learned faster than most of his peers. The teachers said that he had an analytical mind, and the supervisor from the child welfare department added, "Sometimes one adult is enough to change a child's destiny." But Bernard knew that the opposite was true. Sometimes it takes just one child to remind adults who they should be. The story made the news again, but in a different context. Bernard Chambers established the Malik Foundation to help children who had ended up on the streets but had not lost their courage. The foundation's logo featured the shadow of a boy standing at the door of a restaurant. Below it was the motto, "A true hero is someone who tells the truth even when the whole world is silent."